Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of clinical precision. Like you braid your arm, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, the doctor points to it, and that's it.
Right, it's binary. Broken or not broken.
Exactly. It's visible, and frankly, it's comforting because, well, we like things categorized in neat little boxes. But the second you step into the world of human habits, our daily routines, our neurodevelopment, that x-ray machine is just utterly useless.
Or absolutely. It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, the variables in a human life are infinite.
Yeah, they really are.
And they're constantly interacting, like compounding and interfering with one another in ways we rarely ever track.
Which is why I'm so excited about today's deep dive, because we have a literal masterclass in navigating those exact waters. We are looking at a single, heavily detailed source document today. It's a personal blog post from a developer named Ang.
Yeah, titled Resilience and Routine, 2026 Week 16 Progress Report.
Right. And I want to be clear to you listening, we aren't just reading someone's diary today. We are decoding the biofeedback loops of human habits.
Which is a huge task.
It is. The mission here is to look at how meticulously tracking seemingly unrelated threads, everything from open source coding to water intake to fish keeping, reveals the hidden architecture of a highly resilient life.
And I have to say, it is so rare to see this level of holistic synthesis. Usually, personal data is heavily siloed.
Oh, totally. Like you have an app for this, an app for that.
Exactly. People have a fitness app for their steps, a diet app for their calories, maybe a sleep tracker on their wrist. But they rarely cross-reference those data streams to understand the causality.
Right. They don't look at how time spent in the garden might actively alter their knee pain.
Or how ambient weather patterns dictate the quality of the code they write the very next day. But Ang maps the entire ecosystem.
And the foundation of that ecosystem, like the absolute bedrock, is sleep. Because if the sleep system fails, the entire superstructure built on top of it just collapses.
It really does.
So in week 16, Ang reports averaging about 6.6 hours of sleep per day. And the total volume isn't terrible. But they mention dealing with bimodal rest. Essentially, fragmented sleep where they wake up in the middle of the night and sleep in 2 distinct shifts.
Yeah, and bimodal sleep was actually the historical norm before the Industrial Revolution.
Wait, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was very common. But in modern contexts, it often leaves people feeling exhausted because it interrupts those deeper REM cycles.
Right, because their schedules don't allow for it anymore.
Exactly. But Ang doesn't just passively accept this fragmentation. They apply what they call a conservative treatment for sleep.
Which involves what, exactly?
Well, regular massages, a heat pad, and continuously indulging in hobbies before bed. And they notice major improvements at the beginning and the end of the week.
But the wild part to me is that the primary driver of that improvement actually came from hydration. Like, Ang realized that an increase in fluid intake was eliminating these feverish feelings they were having at night. Okay, let's unpack this. Because drinking water to fix a feverish sleep pattern seems almost too simple. Like, how does that actually work?
What's fascinating here is the underlying biological mechanism.
Yeah.
Ang correctly identifies it as vasodilation.
Vasodilation, meaning the widening of blood vessels, right?
Exactly. When you are adequately hydrated, your body has the blood volume necessary to effectively widen its blood vessels. And this physiological shift allows internal core body heat to move out to the surface of your skin and dissipate into the air.
Oh, wow. So you literally cool down from the inside out.
Yes. If you are dehydrated, your vessels constrict to preserve fluid, trapping that heat inside your core, which causes those restless, feverish awakenings.
That makes so much sense. Think of the human body as a complex, liquid-cooled computer processor.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right? If you've ever built a high-end PC, you know that if you don't have enough coolant running through those tubes, the processor overheats. The fans spin out of control and the system just can't power down efficiently.
Yeah, it just runs hot.
So for Ang, hydration is literally the biological coolant necessary to run the shutdown sequence properly at night.
And that thermal regulation isn't operating in a vacuum either. Ang observes the external environment's role in this process too.
Oh, right, the rainy season.
Exactly. Week 16 happens to fall during the local rainy season. So you have internal cooling from the hydration and vasodilation paired directly with the ambient external temperature dropping because of the rain.
It's a synergistic effect.
It really is. It's systemic thinking at its best, linking a meteorological event directly to a physiological state.
And when that biological machine is finally cooled down and rested, you suddenly have the structural capacity to actually move. because in week 16, Aang tracks their daily steps ranging anywhere from 4,500 to over 9,000 steps.
And over 9,000 steps is a highly active day, which becomes structurally significant when you consider that Aang mentions dealing with sporadic knee pain and muscle spasms in previous weeks.
Okay, this is where I want to push back on modern fitness culture for a second, because Aang didn't cure this knee pain by going to a physical therapist or joining a high-tech gym.
No, they didn't.
They cured it through what they term conservative strength training. And that training was literally squatting for long periods while weeding the garden.
Yeah, just functional movement.
Right. Think about your own weekend routines. Like,
Right.
how many of us sit perfectly still at a desk for 40 hours and then punish our joints with an intense hour-long Saturday morning boot camp?
Too many of us, honestly.
We treat exercise like this brutal, isolated event. Meanwhile, Aang is actively rehabilitating a bad knee and stopping muscle spasms through sustained chore-based movements, squatting in the dirt, pulling weeds.
Well, from a biomechanical standpoint, functional daily movement, moving your body through space with continuous low-grade load to accomplish a tangible task, is profoundly superior for joint health than that hero workout mentality.
The hero workout. I love that term.
It's so true, though. Tendons and ligaments respond terribly to acute, chaotic spikes of extreme effort, followed by days of total stagnation. They require steady, manageable engagement to remodel and heal.
And Aang explicitly states this realization in the report, right? That maintaining a consistent daily average of movement heavily outweighs sporadic, high-intensity bursts.
Yes, and they are backing that movement up with deliberate recovery protocols. The heat pads and massage aren't just for sleep. They are for tissue repair.
Though Aang does mention a future goal of acquiring exercise equipment that covers 80% of their body's muscle. So there is a clear acknowledgement that bodyweight gardening squats might eventually plateau in terms of resistance.
True, but the underlying philosophy remains intact regardless of the equipment. It is about a controlled, systemic approach to physical load.
Absolutely. Now, moving that much requires significant fuel, which inherently stresses the body's recovery systems. So in week 16, Aang provides a highly analytical breakdown of their weight fluctuations.
Why is a weight bump?
Yeah, their weight bumped up from 68.94 kilograms to 69.36 kilograms, stabilizing somewhere around the 69.2 to 69.7 range.
And, most people looking at a half-kilogram weight increase immediately adopt a punitive mindset.
Oh, for sure. They panic.
They assume they overate the night before. They view the body as a simple calculator of calories in versus calories out.
Wait, I need you to explain this to me. Because Aang looks at this weight gain and points to a specific night where they only got 4 hours of sleep. How does being awake longer make you heavier?
It sounds weird, right?
Biologically, that feels completely counterintuitive. If you are awake and moving, shouldn't you be burning more energy?
It seems counterintuitive until you factor in the endocrine system. When you only get 4 hours of sleep, your body interprets that severe sleep debt as a biological threat.
Okay, so it goes into survival mode.
Exactly. In response, it spikes the production of cortisol, our primary stress hormone. Elevated cortisol triggers a cascade of systemic inflammation, and inflamed tissues act like sponges, retaining massive amounts of water to protect the cells.
Wow, so that half-kilogram increase isn't fat from extra calories.
No, it is almost entirely retained fluid driven by a cortisol spike from a single night of sleep deprivation. Add in the fluid required to repair muscle tissue from those 9,000-step days, and the weight fluctuation makes perfect physiological sense.
So what does this all mean? It means we need to completely reframe how we look at the bathroom scale. Aang is using the scale as an anxiety and stress thermometer.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like when that number goes up, it's measuring sleep debt, it's measuring cortisol, it's measuring internal inflammation just as much as it's measuring physical mass.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it requires a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence to look at a weight increase, detach from the societal guilt of gaining weight, and logically attribute it to a cortisol spike.
It really does. It's so objective.
And Aang also does a highly objective audit of their diet, noting an imbalance. They mention consuming sugary drinks, having late dinners from 9 p.m. onward, and eating meals they categorize as 0.1, 0.2.
Right, that 0.1, 0.2 ratio. That means 0 plants, 1 part protein, 2 parts carbohydrates.
Which is heavy. But their corrective plan to fix this imbalance isn't a crash diet.
No, they don't starve themselves.
Right, it's sensible recalibration. They reduce outside food, increase water, and green tea intake to flush the retained fluid and return to their staple meals.
Which were oatmeal, soft-boiled eggs, and miso noodle soup with vegetables.
Yes, it is a calculated return to equilibrium.
And only by bringing the physical body into a state of manageable equilibrium does Aang free up the mental bandwidth required to tackle their digital and physical environments.
The cognitive load they manage is intense.
It's wild. We see this play out in their mindful maintenance and micro habits.
Yep.
And let me tell you, the cognitive load this person is carrying professionally requires serious grounding.
Definitely.
They are meditating like 1, 2, or 3-minute sessions, plus walking meditation while raking leaves, fostering this very stoic mindset.
I love the walking meditation idea.
Same. And they're writing 3 posts a day on wildly diverse topics. But more importantly, they are hopping through open source GitHub repositories across entirely different programming languages.
Yeah, Go, Python, Elixir, Erlang, Rust, Haskell.
The mental toll of jumping between those specific languages cannot be overstated.
Oh, absolutely not. You were not just learning different vocabularies, you were switching between fundamentally different paradigms of logic.
Right, it's not like switching from Spanish to Italian.
No, moving from the functional purity of Haskell to the memory-safe systems programming of Rust requires a complete rewiring of how your brain approaches a problem. It is intensely abstract, highly isolating work.
And to survive that level of digital abstraction without burning out, you need a physical anchor. That is exactly what Aang is doing with their analog hobbies.
The fish keeping. Right.
Yes, they are managing pairs of Epistogramma cichlids in what they call their yellow-blue rack.
That is so specific.
I know, and fish keeping at that level requires testing water chemistry, monitoring temperature fluctuations, observing the behavioral dynamics of the breeding pairs. It demands absolute tactile presence in the physical world.
It acts as an externalized focal point. When you are mentally fatigued from abstract coding architecture, staring at a screen trying to visualize data flows, the antidote is a task where the rules are physical and immediate.
Right.
The fish, the guitar, the gardening, these serve as vital counterweights to the digital fatigue.
And Aang applies the same deeply pragmatic mindset to their home improvement and decluttering, too. They employ a strategy of decluttering exactly 1 small item per day. 1 item, physically and digitally.
Just one.
Just one. They note a specific rule. Focus only on the current task you can do right now, regardless of how long the backlog is.
The neurological mechanism behind that rule is brilliant, actually.
How so?
Well, when you look at a massive backlog, say a completely disorganized garage, or an inbox with 10,000 unread emails, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function and planning, gets overwhelmed by calculating the sheer number of steps required to complete the project.
Right, so the brain's natural resistance just kicks in.
Exactly. It registers the massive task as a threat to your energy reserves, so you experience decision fatigue before you've even started. You do nothing.
You just freeze.
Yes. But if the rule is just throw away 1 piece of junk mail, you bypass that neurological friction entirely. The amygdala doesn't flag 1 piece of mail as a threat. You initiate the actions seamlessly. It acts like compound interest for your life organization.
That is so smart. It's like a microdose for productivity. And we see this practical, immediate focus applied to larger physical tasks, too. Because it's the rainy season, the same weather pattern that cooled the air for better sleep. Aang exploits the damp conditions to prep for tile work on their front balcony.
Oh, because the dust won't fly everywhere.
Exactly. Every physical action is timed perfectly with the environmental constraints. It's so dialed in.
It really is.
But all of this intense focus on self-reliance in the physical world, managing the garden, the fish, the biology, it perfectly mirrors a massive systemic shift Aang observes happening in the digital coding world.
And this is perhaps the most prophetic observation in the entire Week 16 report.
I thought so too.
While hopping through those diverse open source repositories, Aang notices a behavioral trend and makes a bold prediction. They predict a significant drop in open source community contributions in the near future.
And the reason for this drop, the catalyst, is the rise of AI and large language models.
Yeah, Aang believes that developers are going to stop collaborating publicly on forums.
Right. Instead, they are going to do their own rubber ducking privately with AI on their personal pet projects.
Now, historically, rubber ducking meant explaining your broken code line by line out loud to an inanimate object on your desk, like a rubber duck, to help you spot the logic error.
Which sounds ridiculous, but it works.
It does. But when the duck couldn't help, you went to human communities. You posted on message boards, you asked senior developers, you engaged in a public exchange of knowledge.
Here's where it gets really interesting. AI has become the ultimate interactive rubber duck. It talks back, It writes the code for you. You don't need the forum anymore.
No, you really go.
But my question is, are we trading the messy, frustrating, but deeply beautiful process of human collaboration for the sterile perfection of isolated hyper-efficiency?
That's the fear.
Like, if I'm a junior developer and I never have to ask a senior developer for help, how do I learn the unwritten rules of the craft? How do we build mentorship?
This raises an important question about the sociology of software development.
Well,
Because open source wasn't just about the code, it was about the social fabric of building something together.
yeah, a community.
Exactly. Aang is highly self-sufficient in their physical life. They manage their own physical therapy, they regulate their own physiological states, they meticulously organize their environment. Now, AI is allowing coders to become entirely self-sufficient islands in the digital realm as well.
Islands, yes.
The raw efficiency of an LLM means you can build complex systems entirely alone. It is fundamentally altering the landscape of digital community.
It's incredibly efficient, but it completely changes how we interact as a species. Which brings us to the core of what we've unpacked today. Aang's Week 16 report isn't a simple list of chores or a tally of hours slept.
Not at all.
It is a blueprint for a life lived with total, deliberate intention. It proves that the seemingly mundane details of your life, a glass of water, a weed pulled from the dirt, a single line of code, are the levers that actually control your reality.
Recognizing that you are a complex, interconnected system is the first step toward actual resilience.
So think about your own hidden variables right now. When you wake up with a stiff back, do you just blame the mattress? Or do you look at the argument you had the night before that spiked your stress and tensed your muscles?
Right, what's the real root cause?
Does your knee pain correlate with how you sit in your garden? Does your weight correlate with your sleep debt? When you start tracking the murky waters of your own life with the precision Aang uses, you might be shocked by the causality you uncover.
You transition from being a passive observer of your symptoms to the active architect of your own baseline.
I love that, the active architect. I want to leave you with a final thought, building on that revelation about AI and rubber ducking. We started this deep dive talking about X-rays.
The desire for clinical precision.
Exactly. We all possess this desire for clean, binary answers in a very murky, complex human world. And AI gives us those clean answers. It solves our coding bugs and answers our queries without the messy friction of human interaction.
It's frictionless.
It is. But if AI eventually allows us to privately solve all our problems, our coding, our health routines, our daily schedules, our creative blocks, without ever having to ask another human being for help, advice, or perspective.
What happens to?
Right. Will future progress reports completely lack human characters? In our pursuit of total, data-driven, optimized resilience, do we risk engineering a perfectly efficient but entirely lonely existence? It's something to think about the next time you turn to a screen instead of a person for the answer.